Okay, Matthew Leal, you are running for Ward 2 City Council.
Yes, sir.
I've heard of that word before. So these are just kind of a conversational questions. My idea behind this was, you can't talk to everybody. They're not always at home. This is an opportunity to not have a 30-second soundbite. You can have a little bit more of a discussion. So
Absolutely.
off we go. First one is about your approach to be an elected official. So there are various approaches to the job of representation. Some officials view themselves as a part of the team once elected and consider their constituents to be represented simply by that official's participation in the governmental process. Others approach representation is to see themselves not as a part of the government team, but instead as a member of the citizenry that represents the wishes of the citizenry to the permanent staff. Others still view their role as an elevated member of staff and a conduit by which the city communicates to the public. So which of those do you feel fits your style?
Tom, I would probably have to say possibly a little bit of all three of them. I believe that our city council person is that person that citizens have to go to when they have an issue with a city matter. And I also believe that it's the city council person's responsibility to relay important information to his constituents in that ward and act in a way as he is a citizen, because he is. He lives in that ward too, or I'm sorry, that council person lives in that ward too. They pay taxes in our city just like everybody else. So I believe that as a city council person, you kind of have to wear all three hats. You have to be someone who relates to our citizens, someone who is willing to speak on their behalf and show strong leadership whenever, even if it goes against the grain of what everyone else is wanting. It's their job to relay what the citizens of that ward are asking for.
Okay. So this next question is about your relationship with staff. The city charter explicitly denotes the roles for council members. And I'd like to know what your view is as a council member with regards to the city manager's staff.
My view is that the city council people are tasked to hold that city manager accountable for his actions and the actions of his staff. They are there to provide the city council and the citizens the information that they are asking for, so everyone can have an educated decision and know all the facts going forward in any situation. And I believe that that's where a city council person is the strongest and holds the most responsibility to their constituents, is to hold that city manager and their staff accountable.
One time I was coming to a meeting and a senior member of a department and I passed in the hall and asked him how his day was going. And we were about to go into a study session and he said, well, we're trying to decide whether or not we want to do this particular deal. Well, that to me indicated that they were trying to decide whether or not they were going to make a presentation that was going to try to talk council into doing something or out of doing something, rather than giving a presentation that just presents the facts and letting council decide.
Exactly. And
so how do you deal with situations like that? You're on the Public Safety Oversight Committee. Do you ever come across something like that? And if so, what do you do?
Oh, absolutely. I've come across that before in that committee, sitting there. And one thing that is paramount is to never take anything at face value, and to always do your due diligence to look into the situation, look into the subject, educate yourself, because sometimes all of the facts aren't going to be given to you, whether that's on purpose or just a mistake. I believe that as a committee member or a council member, it is our job to look into that information that city staff gives us and get what we need to out of it. If the information that we're needing is not in there, then it's our job to ask for it and ask for it and ask for it until we get it.
The charter also talks about the role of the mayor. We have a manager, council, form of government. It's not a strong mayor government. So how do you view council's interaction with the mayor?
Just on a meeting by meeting basis. With the way that our government's set up, it's not a strong mayor government. The mayor is I guess, a higher title and a higher position. So you do have that respect for that position. Ultimately, though, everyone needs to listen to everybody equally, and we all need to work together, council and mayor, to collaborate our ideas, share our thoughts, hear everyone's thoughts, to where we can all make a good decision on behalf of Norman.
Great. If you're elected to be the voice of your constituents in Norman's inclusive community, how would you approach a controversial issue? Would you vote with your personal beliefs, or would you vote with your constituents' preferences?
That's easy. From my beliefs of what a council person is supposed to be, it's not about me. It's about representing the constituents. And if the constituency wants their ward to be represented in a way, then that's my job. That's what I was elected to do. That's what I'm sworn in to do, and that's what I will do.
Sometimes it's difficult to find out exactly what your ward wants. You knock on a few doors and you hear a few people tell you one thing. That might be their sincere belief, and you heard that all one day long, but it may not indeed be the view of the majority of the people in your ward. Mm-hmm. So how do you make that determination of what is the majority view of your ward?
Well, I think first and foremost, you make all efforts to communicate the topic to everybody, whether it be social media, email blasts, phone calls, maybe get some help with the newspaper to set up ward meetings. So first and foremost, I believe you have to do your best to communicate the situation to as many people as possible. And then once that feedback starts to come in, then you just decipher and kind of, to keep it simple, I mean, just, you got two sides, and you got to weigh both sides and make that tough decision sometimes on, well, it seems like I'm kind of in the middle, and basically how you feel about your ward. It's really about having that connection with your ward and knowing how they feel. Mm-hmm. And it goes back to, when you're knocking on doors campaigning, you get to know a lot of your neighbors in the ward. Whenever you're just out and about with your community, not campaigning, just talking at parades and in the park and just interacting with everybody, you should know your ward. And that right there, I believe, can help you make a tough decision whenever you're kind of stuck in the middle of not knowing where everyone wants to be.
Very good. Trust is an essential part of governing. Without trust, it's hard to accomplish anything. How would you build trust in the community?
Well, first and foremost, you build trust by doing right by people. If you tell somebody you're going to do it, you do it. Whether it's calling them back, replying back to an email, going by their house to look at something, making a meeting, you start there by fulfilling what you say you're going to do. My dad taught me a long time ago that you can always tell a character of a man by if he keeps his word or not. And that's to the smallest thing of, here, let me give you a call at this time. Or something bigger of, let's make this appointment where we're going to meet here at this time for this issue. So first and foremost, you definitely have to keep your word. If you say you're going to do something, do it.
And that actually is an excellent point on I remember a few years ago there was a vote in Lawton, and the people had an expectation, a promise that certain projects would get done, and not all the projects got done. And so the people then, in subsequent bond elections, always turned down the city because they didn't trust the city to do what the city said they were going to do. So this is kind of going with your do what you say you're going to do. So how do you see your philosophy then extending to, yeah, it's important to return the phone calls and to make a meeting when you say you're going to do it, but how does that extend to the city then when it comes to their promise to the public and fulfilling their promise and their perception?
Yeah, the way that translates is it's our responsibility that if the city staff or the city manager tells the citizens, hey, we're going to do this bond at X amount of dollars by X a date, then it's our job to hold that city manager accountable and to hold city staff accountable to what we tell the citizens that's going to happen. And I believe that whenever you set that precedence and you set that expectation with not only your colleagues that, hey, we need to do this right, we need to do it the first time, but you also set it with the city manager, and definitely hold that person accountable, because that person is accountable for us or to us.
Another part of trust is transparency. We heard that word thrown out a lot the other night during the forum. So for some people, transparency is just exactly what it sounds like, but for other people, they take it more legalistically, and they're talking about government transparency, and the Open Records Act, the Open Meetings Act go to giving people those tools to know how decisions are made. Mm-hmm. There's been some controversy in Norman about whether or not that has been followed properly. What do you think a council member's role is in making sure that the public get the information that they are entitled to?
See, I think I understand the question. And I would have to say that it goes back to having a high standard of yourself and having that integrity of doing the right thing legally, morally, when someone's looking or when someone's not looking. And I believe that we have to make sure that we listen to the citizens on what kind of information they're asking for. We also have to hold each other accountable whenever it comes to open records violations or meeting violations, stuff like that. So it really reminds me of whenever I was in the military. You always policed your friend. You policed your buddy. If they were messing up, and then it was your job to point it out to them and say, hey, we don't need to do that anymore. And then, of course, if something didn't happen, then if nothing was corrected, then you go a step further. And to me, that question reminds me of that. And it brings me back to just having those values of policing yourself first and policing everyone else, just as I would want someone to point out to me, hey, we may not want to do this because of this. Let's rethink it.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Hey, thank you guys for the invitation.
Well, sure.
It was